Okay, so we are recording. So I'm going to now go to presenting my screen. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen. If you want to also remove me, so you just have the screen on the presentation, if you go to the three dots and click change view, there should be a setting called spotlight, and that will remove me and you can just see the screen. If you've got any difficulties, then just message Michael. But otherwise, I'm going to start, okay? So obviously we've been in lockdown for a good period of time, and now we're going to come out of it, which is fantastic. Originally, it was meant to be the 4th of July, hence this meeting on the 2nd. But yesterday we had confirmation that's not really been announced in the press or anything, that we should be able to return when the school's finish. So in the Kingston area, that's around the 20th of July. So that's great news for us. We've told the leisure centres and they're happy for us to come back from that date. So the structure of the meeting is there'll be two parts. So the first part of the agenda is going to focus on information you need to know before we return. So that's mainly going to be you as an employee, what's your status moving forwards, with all of the COVID secure documents that we need, how can you access that along with the other apps and services we already use? We've made that a little bit easier. And then finally, there is the COVID training you'll need to do and just you learning the new processes so it's smooth when we go in and back to classes. So that's going to be a shorter section at the beginning and then we'll stop for some questions. After that, we're going to look at when we return, what changes and adaptations you'll need to adopt to make sure that you're following the guidelines the government have set, in addition to those from British Gymnastics. So that'll be changes that we're making to the classes and the venues that we can or cannot use at this point in time. Health and safety. So in addition to the risk assessments and the pack that you sign every single year in July, there are now some new COVID risk assessments, which I shared with you yesterday. If you've had a chance to read them, that's great. Otherwise, we'll go over some key features of them and then you can read them in your own time. And then you'll be sent out a document to sign. And then finally, there'll be the cleaning, the enhanced procedures we'll be doing, and also the chemicals that we'll be using so that you know what's around and how safe they are. I think going forward for this presentation and when we return, naturally in some way we're very fortunate that we had the case just after February half term, because there really isn't too much change for us to do when we return, because we were doing a lot of cleaning, we were doing some social distancing. Now there has been some measures put in by the government in terms of the amount of people per bubble, per group, and that pretty much would be sort of the real change for us. Okay, so I've moved on. So I guess a key question for you is when will I return to my role? So the first day that we look to go back is potentially Friday the 17th, as that's the day the schools break up. And then anywhere between the week commencing the 20th of July. So that will be the first phase of the return. So everybody will still be on furlough up until that point. And our goal is to retain all staff members by using either furlough, short time working, which is what we initially put you on before the furlough came out, where we tried to give everybody some form of hours so they could stay in their role, and adaptations here and there. But the good news is that obviously I shared with you last night that we have July and August at both Kingston and Chessington. We can run all through the day, all through the evening, 7 days a week. And then Holy Cross, we're just waiting to hear back. As we return, the team members that have the higher qualifications where they can work independently, so that level 2 qualification, will be brought back first, because the guidelines currently state that there needs to be 2 adults to every group of 15 people. And obviously with the requirements of being all around the building, letting people in, controlling their flow of the one-way system and everything, we need to have the ability for that qualified person to be able to work independently upstairs. and then also deal with any issues downstairs, and if they're first aid qualified, going to the isolation room and everything. So the level 2s will come back first with some level 1s, and then followed by the award scheme coaches. And we will probably be able to start preparing timetables maybe in a week or 2, once we have our bookings confirmation with the leisure centres, because some of them will have to obviously bring back their staff to accommodate our return. So as we mentioned, the second module is that we now have an intranet just in the phase of being built. So this is a Google site. So it will replace the onboarding that you went through when you got the paper copies of how to use iClass Pro, Jolt, the Google accounts. So it will just be a lot easier for you. So whether you're in the venue and you think, oh no, what's the Wi-Fi code, or oh, what's the name of the receptionist at Chessington or at Kingston, all that details will be in there. So there'll be a guide on iClass Pro, which you can go through, so you can self-serve if you have any issues with the app. Some of you have, I doubt you have, but the customer portal has been refreshed, so it now looks a lot more modern. It's got a new identity, and customers may ask you questions on that. You can quickly pull up a help sheet, which may be able to support them if they're waiting outside the building and they've just caught you at that point. You'll have access for a quick link to your BrightHR and your BrightSafe. So that's going to be your company documents, your qualifications, and also the health and safety risk assessments that I've shared. As I mentioned, the venue details will be there. So you'll know the email address, the telephone, the Wi-Fi codes, and the addresses if you're traveling to a site you're not that familiar with. So that will be very handy. And also Michael and I may not be at all the sessions due to the amount of hours that we're scheduled to run. So if you need to know some details of that particular venue, you can self-serve. As part of the government's return to work, there needs to be an increased focus on recording your health and safety checks, your cleaning checks, to make sure you're COVID secure. If there was an outbreak, we'll be asked to produce reports and evidence, and we can do that via Jolt. And that will prove that Susie did the cleaning on that day and she signed it off between the class, and then in an hour's time, Gareth did the cleaning, for instance. So then we can prove that if there was an outbreak, we did actually follow the plans as we were meant to. You'll be able to quickly find all of the quick links to all the Google services. So for instance, obviously we're on Meet today, but if someone says it's on Google Drive, you'll be able to access that from there quite quickly if you didn't have the app installed. And then finally, for those that are eligible for the pensions or cash plan, there'll be details of how to quickly find out what your pension scheme contributions are, find your pay slips, and then access the cash plan if you're rolled in onto that, if you're over 18. So Michael's working on that, and that should launch in the next week or so. And it will be very easy to use, and we'll send you an email when that happens. And then the final module in the first section of what we need to do before we return, there will be learning some new processes. So one of them will be an e-learning, which we'll send out from Peninsula, and that's about what COVID is, and also what you need to do in terms of your personal hygiene within the facility and social distancing, just so as an organisation we can say that everybody received training on how to do proper hygiene, how to do social distancing, and they know the importance of why we need to abide by the government's regulations. And there'll also be a declaration. So just before you start, you'll be sent it's just a checklist to say that you haven't been showing any symptoms, no one in your household is showing any symptoms, just so that we have that on record. And also, I don't believe we're going to have to test you, but there's also a few questions in there about COVID testing, whether you'd be happy to have a test, etc. If, obviously there was an outbreak. But as we go into the winter time, it may be a requirement that we have to check that you're getting tested regularly, because you might be in contact with more people than maybe some other jobs in different sectors. And then we will be doing a soft opening. So for the first few days, just to bring in the first phase of staff, it will probably just be the competitive athletes, so that we can just make sure and iron out any kinks that we have in terms of social distancing, routes around that particular venue, first aid practice, if some, we can do some role playing just to make sure everything's working out. And then those people that receive the training in phase 1, as we introduce some new staff into phase 2, they can then do the on-the-job training with the new cohort that have just started. So you can pass that information on and share that knowledge. And also, I sent an email about the Google Chat app. Obviously, we're not going to have as many staff members per class because of the social distancing restrictions of 2 people per 15. So it's likely you may be in the sports hall and someone else is going to be at the front door, and we need a way to communicate rather than walkie-talkie. So we can use the Google Chat app, sign onto the Wi-Fi at the venue, and if there's any questions, you can call through the chat app or you can text, just if you have any questions or concerns there. So that's the first phase of what we need to do beforehand. Before we get there, there probably will be, as the phases go in, some more online stuff just to go through, the hygiene and the expectations there. We're going to touch on that on module 2. But Michael, if you have any questions, then unmute yourself and ask them. Or Michael, has anybody posted any questions in the chat before we move on? Michael? Michael? I'll check myself. No. Does anybody have any questions? Louise, you said you had questions? No? Okay, we're going to move on.
No, I did. Sorry, I couldn't work out how to unmute the thing. Basically, my question.
Did everyone hear me? Because I've also in a fear that no one's hearing me. Okay, good. Thank you, Lucy. I can see you now. Okay. Yes, Louise, what did you have?
If they want to refill their water bottle, do they have to clean the water fountain down every time they use it?
So I'm going to come into that in a little bit because each requirement's going to be different at different venues. I'm going to suggest that everyone brings enough water in water bottles to survive the whole class, in case the water fountain is out of action.
Cool. Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions before we move on? Super. Okay. The more purposeful information is about to appear. So I'm just going to go back onto presentation mode. Oops. Am I still sharing my screen? Yeah. So. Right, we're going to move on. So as you would have had in your email yesterday, we now have a situation where we're not quite sure what's happening at the Holy Cross School, so our new Malden site. So we are waiting confirmation. Those that are there would probably acknowledge that the corridor and such is quite a slim way, and they've had a bit of difficulty with their social distancing, but I'm confident we'll be able to start up at the same time as the other venues. But and equally, Kingston was flip-flopping back and forth of whether or not we'd be able to open. So we actually went in 2 or 3 weeks ago and deconstructed all the trampolines because they were saying we might not be back until October or January. And at that time, Kingston Council had secured us a 7-day access to Chessington Sports Centre in the big atrium there. So what's very good is that because we're only allowed 15 people per class, we should be able to fit everybody in the evenings and people can make the makeups that we've given them as a thank you for supporting us during the time off. So Chessington, I hadn't been to Chessington for a few years. We did actually have some classes at Chessington over a decade ago. So they've got a big atrium. So this is a space that we will use. It's very warm in there because it inflates the roof. And it's 30 meters by 20 by 10 meters high, which is the same size as arena. And then right next door, there's also a sports hall, which is the same size, ceilings are slightly lower. So there's some equipment being moved over there from the container. So there's 3 trampolines there at the moment, and the plan is to invest in 2 more trampolines for Kingston, 2 ultimates to then move the slightly older models over here to Chessington, as we plan on running classes here as the autumn term begins in the evenings as well. But the main question is, how will the classes work as we go into into COVID secure time? the main thing to remember is that we're going to be on a flexible timetable for the rest of the year. I don't imagine that we're going to go back to any way that we were for at least another year. And be prepared for plans to change due to the unstable nature. You know, we might find that Kingston is suddenly closed. We might find that Chessington is suddenly closed due to an outbreak. But the main focus that we have got is phase 1 will be July through to September, which is the school holidays. We're working on a July 20th reopening. Throughout the time, we plan on running the evening classes with times adjusted to allow for cleaning, to allow for people to get in and out of the building. And then the makeup tokens will be issued, will be available to be used during the day. And we have then structured the classes so that the students will be in a program bubble. So the classes such as Jump and Tumble and Jump for Fun have been temporarily axed, and we've got new class names so that rather than just 4 programs, I think there's something like 12 different program levels, so that if we did have to isolate some people for 2 weeks due to someone getting symptoms and the track and trace people call us up, there's a smaller chunk of members that will have to isolate for 2 weeks, rather than, you know, a big mix and match of people. Phase 2 will be the autumn school term from September to December. Again, regular classes in the evening with longer time adjustments. Obviously, some people will have to move to Chessington or Malden because Kingston was obviously very busy on some of the evenings, and that won't be able to happen. So there's going to be some flexibility. It will probably still be allow people to pick and choose where they go as long as they stay in their program level. And then phase 3 is January to March, when we hope to start return to more of a regular timetable, something that looked like what it did in January. Hopefully more people per class, just so it starts to look busy. The competitions have all been cancelled. The first event that we're looking towards is the London Championships in March. So that's normally when the NDP team get chosen to go to Birmingham. Whether that runs or not, we just don't know. Probably it won't. Probably there won't be any competitions next year. It's at the beginning of it, but we just don't know. Also, the Olympics have been moved back, which means generally that year the national competitions are somewhat subdued. We'll just have to wait and see. But it's kind of nice to think the gymnasts do know what they're working towards an event, whether that's at the lowest level or not. Obviously, when we return, I'll go into a bit more, but we obviously have to phase them back in because some of them might not have done any form of exercise over the period of time that we've been off. There was online classes, which some of us have been doing alongside the children on flexibility and conditioning, but obviously some of them probably haven't done that as well. Well, I know they haven't because of the way we can monitor it. So these are the new classes that we are going to be having. So it's going to be 5 different levels. So we've got the safety skills, foundations, somersaults, advanced, and dream chaser. And there's also going to be adults. Now, what we're going to be doing is having the safety skills. So that's going to be awards 1 to 4.2. So this is where we're going to put new trials or recently new members, and probably where the youngest jump and tumble students are going to end up. So some of these will be age banded as well. And so that's going to teach them the fundamentals so that they don't get hurt. They can go on their garden trampoline with no problem. Parents can ease any worries. We're then going to have foundations split into 3 different levels based on the skills. So safety skills can be taken by an award scheme coach, foundations, an award scheme coach as well, because what we've done is plucked out the somersaulting skills and moved them onto the somersaulting level so that you don't feel pressured to teach maybe a 3/4 turnover, etc., that you may not have covered on your course. It would just mean that we know that if you're teaching foundations, you can do the whole skill tree, and we will pick them out. So as you can see, some of the levels are quite small on the foundations, just so you as a coach as well know that you're only having to teach a very small number of skills. It should make it more pleasurable for you as well. And you can do a whole class learnings. Everyone's going to be doing the first few skills here. Then we'll move on to the next skills and extensions for those that may be on the higher level of the award. Then we're going to have the somersaulting skills. So you'll need to be a level 2+ to oversee this class. So as you can see, most of these are just that one level. So the goal now is to achieve either the front somersault, the back somersault, and then combine some of the other skills into it when you get to Ward 10. And you can see there's 3 different levels. So we're already on to 6, 7 different classes. And then we have advanced, which is for anybody that's on level 10.1 and above. And this will also include the compete for fun athletes from the Saturday. And then the Gene Tracer competitive classes will remain in their 3 tiers. We might merge the 2 of the tiers to make 15, but that's the plan. We haven't communicated this with the families yet. We're still waiting for the final ratio numbers from the government. And once we have this, we'll let families know we've worked out what class everyone's going to go in. They're going to be eligible to go to the classes in the evening. Book yourself in for your weekly class. And then for the makeups that you've accumulated, you can go to one of the designated makeups. Some of them might be in the evening, weekends, and during the day, because we're going to be running throughout the whole of the holiday. That's just the difference in the class structure. Oh, and also one thing to note is that when we assign the skill tree for that class, it will only show the skills up to the highest level. So say, for instance, you're in foundations and you finish 6.1, that it's not going to show 6.2, 7, 8, anything higher. At that point, they'll need to move up, and we'll obviously have to check that they're COVID safe, no symptoms whatsoever, and then move them up to that class. So when the classes come in, this is how the timeline of a typical class will look. So we'll collect the gymnasts. The building itself, the leisure centre, will have a maximum capacity. So they'll be asked to wait outside the entrance, the designated entrance, as there probably will be a one-way system, and we'll collect them upon arrival. We will ask the gymnasts to be more prepared than they usually are, to have their hair tied up and secure with additional supplies. Ask the parents to put the plasters on before class, and to train their child to put a plaster on, so we don't have to get close to them to do that minor first aid. They can self-serve. As Louise asked, multiple water bottles and everything they need to bring in a sports bag. And that sports bag will be their item, and everything will go in to stop any cross-contamination. Obviously, they'll need to wash their hands or use the hand sanitizer before the class, and the parents won't be allowed in the building. The only exception may be a trial, just so that they can come and feel settled and then leave, but obviously not if we're going to push over the maximum people in space. After that, the gymnasts will come into the sports hall. They'll get dressed, put the items in their bag on a marker that's 1 or 2 meters apart, depending on what distance we need by that date. And then they'll line up with social distancing markers, and you'll give a safety talk about social distancing, about hand washing, and then obviously what's going to be covered in the class for the day. During the classes, as we go back, before everyone gets on the trampoline or touches any piece of equipment, they'll need to hand sanitize, and they'll need to do this after every single turn, so that, because obviously they're going to be putting their hands on the equipment, it will obviously go on the trampoline bed. If they do a seat landing or front landing, they're going to have to hand sanitize between every single turn. And also, say you have 4 people around a trampoline, say the trampoline was on its own and you had 4 people around each side, that will be their designated side. So there's no cross-contamination when they get on and off. So say they will spot, and then they're the only one that's going to touch that element of, or that part of the frame pad. So that's how it's probably going to work, a designated entry and exit point for them. And then if a gymnast is particularly sweaty, that sweat has to come off them, and they're not allowed to bring a sweat towel because it's unhygienic. So there'll be a hygiene station with the hand sanitizer, with tissues in case they sneeze or need to cough. And there'll also be some blue towel, the center feed, and that's now in a dispenser, so it's all hygienic. They'll take their sweat off their face or hands or wherever it could be, arms, because those parts of the bodies will touch the trampoline, and then they'll dispose of it in the bin next to it. At the end of the class, again, everyone will hand sanitize before they leave, line up to be dismissed, and then they'll get ready for departure, line up by the wall, and then you as the coach will hand the gymnast back to their parents, who'll be waiting at a different exit point. And then in the rare event that a parent is late to collect them, they'll either need to stay isolated with you, sort of outside the exit door if it's a nice day, so that for the gymnasts coming in, there's not going to be any cross-contamination between the classes, meaning that they could pick it up and then transfer it onwards. That's how they're going to stay in their bubbles. If anybody has any questions on this particular timeline of the class, just put your microphone on and ask. I'll give you 10 seconds or so and then I'll move on. Okay, I'm going to move on. This is obviously going to be what we do when we return, and then we'll learn as we are at that particular venue or as we deliver the class, and then we'll make adaptations. So it's never going to be static, it's also going to be learning as it goes on. So we're now moving into the health and safety element. There's 4 different sections or organizations that are supporting us to be COVID secure. And the first one of those is British Gymnastics. So if you follow them on social media or have been on the website, you'll see that there's a step forward toolkit. So every class receives this huge toolkit, which is gymnastics specific. So obviously we have fabrics and materials that aren't normally found elsewhere. So how to clean the equipment, what equipment can't be used, some of the softer non-washable mats, such as the teddy bear mat, can't particularly be used, but we can if we wash it after every class. Also, they've given advice of how to move around the gymnastics hall. So some of the risk assessments sent out, some of the components in there was put into the risk assessments. So for Peninsula Health and Safety, so we've re-engaged with them for their health and safety so that we're going to get some bespoke documentation for the venues and for the activities that we do. The good thing about this is that Michael and I will have 24-hour telephone support. So if anything happens or we're unsure from the information we have, we can just check with somebody there and then. And also, as part of being COVID secure, so if there is a second outbreak, if we can evidence the health and safety executive reporting, such as on Jolt, the risk assessment checks that I do behind the scenes, that's all on a secure portal. The health and safety executive can say, well, you can stay open because you've got that evidence to reassure us. And then as part of that, Alex has agreed to be the health and safety officer to check and challenge my risk assessments, make sure everything's going as planned. And Louise is going to be a health and safety representative who you can go to if you've got any concerns, questions, or if you feel somebody might be letting the side down, you can confidentially tell Louise and she'll feed it up or resolve the issue. We need to keep our engagement with the venues. So obviously we might not have been able to have come back till July, but because of the good relationships, the good line of communication we have with those people that run the centres, because they're linked to the schools, they've been able to influence the governors or higher up people to allow us to come back. And there's a number of clubs that haven't been as fortunate as us and aren't going to be able to return until October or January. And that obviously might mean that those clubs could potentially not be surviving. But what that means is that we must religiously follow the rules and the adaptations that they make in those venues. So once we know what they choose to do, they'll be updated to the risk assessment and that will be shared out to you. And then finally, the COVID risk assessment. So at the moment, we've done draft 1 and that's been shared out, but it will be updated. So there's one which is for the office, but that also contains things such as food hygiene, the use of lifts, cleaning, personal hygiene, stuff that's not particularly focused on one of the venues, which we might need to do. And then there's one per venue. And at the moment, they're pretty much looking the same, whether it's Kingston College, Chessington or Holy Cross. But once they tell us particular entrances and exits, where they want us to leave our bags, where they want parents to wait, and that will be updated and we'll fall in line, everything will be hunky-dory there. But those are live documents and we are going to encounter some difficulties and stuff. Just a few things. If you go into the office one, there'll be things such as, you'll be instructed or advised not to share phones. It's very easy to look at someone's phone and touch it, but it's obviously going to be the item that's going to have the most germs and bacteria on. So that, obviously don't share phones. Other things such as, color code, not color coding, using the cleaning supplies and stuff, that will be in there as well, how to do that, how to use it, when to use it. So I would suggest have a read. They're quite thorough documents, and then they'll be updated when they need to, or the government changes the advice. So in terms of PPE, we have invested, we've got gloves, we've got masks, we've got visors, we've got aprons. None of it actually needs to be worn during a traditional class. The main advice is your personal hygiene, just wash that regularly upon arrival, when you leave during the classes, and if you can't get to a tap, then use the hand sanitizer as much as you can, and keep 1 meter apart. 2 ideally, but you know, we are going to be spotting by the trampoline, etc. Obviously when we'll be cleaning, you do have the option to wear gloves and aprons, but none of the chemicals that we use will do you any harm when they're diluted. I really don't feel that you'll be in a position needing to mix up the concentrate cleaning solution, but if you do, then that's the only time you'll need to wear gloves. The only time we do actually need to wear PPE is when we administer first aid. So those which do have a first aid qualification, they'll be spoken to separately, but you will need to have the full gear, because it's likely you're going to be coming within 1 meter and there'll be bodily fluids in some instances. So you need to wear gloves, an apron, a face mask, and a face shield to protect yourself. Everything will go in the bin apart from the face shield, which is you can clean down. So it's all single use, which is why, because of, say someone's had a graze and they forgot to put a plaster on, and that child can't put the plaster on themselves for whatever reason, you will have to gear yourself up, and that might take a few minutes. They'll all be very easily accessible, but we're trying to avoid going overboard. So if someone does have a minor sprain and needs an ice pack, well, you don't need to go within 2 meters. You can hand them that ice pack or pass it to them, and then they can put that on their legs. You wouldn't need PPE for that. If someone needs a plaster, they can open up the first aid kit and get themselves the plaster. Obviously, we still fill in the accident reports, but you wouldn't need to dole up with all the PPE. So it's just a case-by-case basis there. But that's the only time in the guidelines where we must wear it. So cleaning. So this is obviously something which we were doing before we were told to lock down. And it's the second best prevention of the transmission after personal hygiene. So there'll be 5 steps really. The first one is the deep clean, which will happen before we open any classes at a particular venue. So that'd be a thorough scrub down of all the mats, the trampolines, and even the sports hall, cupboard doors, etc. Because we're going to be the ones using it most, if you think at Kingston, so let's make sure that we've got those bits we touch the most. And there's already a jolt schedule for cleaning on there. Then say we go into regular classes, at the start of the day, it will just be a general tidy up, dust underneath the trampolines if needed, and the floor which is collected since the last class, and obviously wash your hands and sanitize on arrival. The idea is that the people from the previous class will have already cleaned everything for you to obviously deeper clean at the end of the day. And then during the class, if someone coughs, sneezes, clearly on the apparatus, or is very sweaty and has smeared it all over the trampoline, then that will need to be cleaned either by yourself or by that gymnast, because there'll be bottles dotted around. And any of the disposable, there'll be microfiber cloths, there'll be a color-coded system, red, green, yellow, and blue. We've invested in just Rubbermaid branded items so that they're commercial grade. So if you drop it, it's not going to burst open with water. And they're used in medical settings because it can get very dirty in and around the trampolines. So they'll be color coded. There'll be a special hygiene bag which it goes in, that'll be washed at 90 degrees, and then it will be good to be used for the next time. So I'll be able to wipe down. There's new brooms, mops, and everything. If you use any disposables such as blue paper towel, then that will, as the gymnasts will wipe themselves down, or tissues, then it will go into the bin. And then that bin bag will need to be tied up, and then the leisure centre should put it in quarantine for 72 hours, and then it can then go in the bin by the bin people so that they aren't at a risk themselves of contracting it from touching the bag or the bag, items falling on them. Then between the classes, the class 1 leaves, there'll be a time period when we'll use the D10 cleaner, which is a detergent and sanitizer, so we don't have to clean it twice. It's all rolled into one. We'll spray that on the mats and wipe that all down, or use the spray mops. And then on the trampoline beds, which can't get saturated wet, we'll spray with Dettol, which will kill the bacteria and the virus. I'll wipe it with the wipe. So we're just going to experiment what's best there. Eurotramp, Continental, the companies that make the trampolines have yet to sort of name a preferred product, but they are apparently testing it all on the trampolines. And then once we know what the best product is to use on their device, then we will do that. At the moment, most people are saying Dettol, but we'll find out in a few days' time, probably before opening. If not, we're using the Dettol. And then end of day cleaning. This will be the sort of the mini deep clean at the end of each day to make sure the team that come in probably quite early in the morning don't have to do it, which will be the same as between the classes with a bit more attention. So everything should sparkle, and it will probably involve a dust down, because we can leave the equipment up. Dust is going to form under the trampolines, which will then spread towards the mat. So we've got a big V mop, but hopefully better than what they have to put at each venue as well. There'll be a lot of cleaning, and as I said, you can wear the gloves, you can wear an apron if you don't want to get wet or splashes on you as well, but it's not essential, it's your choice. It will all be readily available as well. So we're coming near to the end here. So there are some chemicals we will be using. So there were COSH assessments before. Nothing that, as I said, you will use is hazardous to you in the way that they have been mixed, because it's the concentration has now gone down because we're adding water. As I said, you may want to wear gloves or aprons. There are risk assessments for each of the items that I have done, which will show you what to do if it gets in someone's eyes, they breathe it in, it's too strong. And there'll also be a safety data sheet. So if you haven't got the full answer, say someone's drunk the alcoholic hand sanitizer, you will be able to know what to do in that situation just by going on to the intranet, clicking on the safety data sheets, and you'll be able to pull that up. The one thing to say, although I don't think it's going to matter to us, is that obviously the hand sanitizer is alcohol, so that will be secured when it's stored as well, because it's flammable, as are some of the other chemicals, but you'll be able to see all of that. So after going through over that, so this is sort of the higher level. Does anybody have any particular questions about either their personal situation, the cleaning, the way classes are going to work, that they might want to know now? Eva, put it in the chat. Okay.
Say someone has like a bad injury, are you still expecting us to put on all the PPE?
So obviously yes. When you go on your course, they do say try and put the PPE on before you do anything. Obviously, if the only time which you're allowed to touch somebody without their consent is if they're about to fall off on top of you, or you're going to save their life. So don't run away if someone's going to fall on you. You can support them, and clearly, if someone has hurt themselves, you're not going to walk away. You're going to bring them over to you, check what the situation is, make them safe and you safe, and then probably put on the PPE, or somebody will probably come running over with a face shield for you. And maybe even for them if you look like you're going to be in that position for a long time. We'll share the guidance on first aid to those that are first aid qualified, so that they know what they can do. But it's very much a sensible approach. Obviously now the incidence rates of people having COVID is really quite low. So obviously that child's immediate safety is just as important. So we will share that, but there'll be more than one person probably that will be able to.
I have a question. What's the deal with like supporting somersaults and stuff?
So at this point in time, we're not allowed to touch the gymnasts. So they're suggesting that we use safe practice, so such as using very big mats. So a lot of them are going to maybe need some help on their back or front somersaults if they haven't done it for a while. So British Gymnastics are just saying, or for the first few weeks back, they may not actually be physically ready or at the level that they left you on.
Yeah.
They're saying don't use hand supporting. As far as we're aware, you probably can use the rig as long as you have enough belts, which we do. And a lot of the higher level gymnasts will want to go in the rig or the bungee rig before maybe doing their double somersaults, because it's been a very long time and that will be accommodated for. We've made adaptations by getting sheaths for the bungee cords, etc. And then if you're rigging, it will probably be use gloves. I would imagine at some point down the line, we'll be allowed to support if you wear the PPE. So I went to the dentist yesterday and the dentist was wearing full PPE. And I would imagine that if we wanted to, we could do that. The only restriction is obviously the insurance of head coverings. Whether or not you're allowed to wear it, I don't know. But when we go back, there will be no supporting just like before we close down.
Okay, cool.
In America, they've had people, I mean, it's a completely different country, but people have signed to say, I'm happy for my child to do manual supporting, for you to touch my child, so to speak, or get close to them. Whether or not something like that happens over here, I don't know that it's a consent basis, and we'll work with that as it comes in. But obviously, they will get to that sticky point where we actually will need to step in and do something. It might be that you teach them a back somersault with two coaches holding the rig belt, both stood on the frame pad.
Yeah.
So if something does go wrong, you can just elevate them in the air. You won't be able to obviously physically push them around if they need it, but there will be some barrier to stop them landing on their head if they don't make it all the way round. I think people will be creative and we'll learn from other clubs sharing things.
We also have a rig at the Chessington location that I went in yesterday to have a look at it and test it. So there'll be some work done on it, but we may be able to have a rig at the locations, and if it does come to it, we'll just then have to put on sessions where they go into the rig, and then we just hope when they take it out.
Oh, cool.
Yes, so that's the only thing that we don't know yet what's going to happen. Because if you think in some of the preschool classes, for instance, that's very much not in necessarily trampoline, but you were touching those children non-stop. So there must be some kind of adaptation coming in. Definitely not in the first phase, but probably in the autumn time.
With the whole trial thing as well, you know what you were saying earlier on, what if they're like better than awards 1 to 4? Do you then recommend they go to another class, or do we, obviously because of the whole 15 bubble thing, do we then have to ask you? Because then essentially they'll be joining a new bubble, won't they?
Most of the trials we're thinking, as we ease ourselves in gently, will probably be like a 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 basis, because we don't want to obviously put them in a class which they may then quickly leave. But we might get some people that are just not very good and worthy to go into the safety skills. And I'm thinking the very young children, maybe under the age of 8, those that sort of would go to jump and tumble. But obviously, if you get a 16-year-old that's got experience, then they will probably be much more advanced than that. So there'll probably be 2 lots of trials, maybe one for ages 4 to 7, and then one for children aged, or anybody aged 8+. So that one will have an enhanced skill tree that will probably have everything.
Cool.
And then so you get somebody that can just pop around loads of somersaults. You can then say, oh yes, I'll suggest that you go into Foundations X, or why don't we do another trial together, you and I, get you ready for that class, and then we'll pop you into that bubble, so to speak. So it might be that they have a few trial classes to get them ready to a certain level if they are better. It's just
that makes sense.
Those situations which we'll probably work our way out. And because, I mean, if they're not showing any symptoms and the trials are kept to very low numbers, they could then move up a class. We're going to get the situation where people need to move up a class anyway. So it might be done at the end of every month. But I think those are kind of things that we'll probably wait for a bit more guidance. I think we'll start off quite settled, and then we'll have to move people up and around. And we'll get to the situation where some parents won't want sibling A to move up because it means they have to come into kind of sibling B, but that child will just have to repeat everything on the highest level. And that will just be that. But we have to sort of protect the bubbles, because
you can't please everyone. They need to understand that obviously the children need to stay in these bubbles and you can't keep moving people around.
Yeah, so basically, so when we get to the makeup, so say you're in Foundation 2, you'll be able to pick an evening style class, which will probably mirror the location, the time that you've already previously came before lockdown. And then you'll be able to pick Foundation 2 from all the different locations during the day to do your makeup classes that you have collected. And then if anybody, so you might have people mixing from Kingston, New Milton and Kingston, but they'll all be in Foundation 2, which could be 30, and maybe maximum up to 30 people.
Yeah.
If, God forbid someone gets it, we just discount those 30 people, and then because they'll be the ones that will be worried, and then we'll just continue, and we'll take an assessment on whether the staff need to isolate or not. I doubt they will, but we'll have to see.
We can also use a register attendance. So, for example,
Yes.
if they do a makeup and they haven't moved location, and we know everyone at Chessington and New Malden are safe to continue.
Yes.
So we all have the data to make sure that we can keep running those classes in that situation.
Yeah, so I don't know if everyone had he's on his headphones, but yeah, so because we're going to have a contact tracing ourselves with the registers and clocking in and out from the staff. Michael, do you want to just turn off your microphone? There we go. Is that you, Michael?
I just turned it off. I think that's you.
And okay, it seems I got quieter, whatever that was. Yeah, we can contact trace people to say, oh, look, you've come in contact with somebody, but you've only ever been to Chessington, and we can work our way back. And then parents can make a decision what they want to do. We don't actually know how it's going to work, because they may just say, oh, it's absolutely fine for you to all continue because you followed all these hygiene measures, but we'll just wait and see. I mean, if they're at Chessington, it's wonderful because they can go across the road and get tested. If we have any concerns or they have any concerns, because you can walk in there and get tested. Is there any further questions? There will be follow-up when we get more specific guidance on these issues, or when there's some case history from another club, hopefully that's had to deal with it.
The isolation room.
Yes.
I'm guessing, where is the isolation room going to be? And I'm guessing we have to wear full PPE and calling the parents. So do we hand the child back to their parents? Does the parent come in and get them?
So I've already asked the venues what are their measures for the venue, and that would include an isolation room. So when we find out where that is, that's where we'll take them. So again, as you said, we will need to wear full PPE if we're doing anybody. If we suspect anyone's got any of the symptoms, the person that is going to stay with them will dress themselves up to make themselves secure. Obviously, we've all got their parents' contact details via the iClass Pro app. We'll contact them, say they're looking a bit unwell. It could not be COVID. You may want them to get tested, but we've isolated them. So if it is COVID, they don't have anything. They themselves can then go and get a test from mobile units or such as Chessington, which is currently set up. And then that way we'll find out quite quickly if they had it or not.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Sorry, I have one more.
Yes.
What enforcement are we putting? Because obviously some of the children may be more in the competitive pathway, are quite close friends. Then outside of trampolining, they'll be not distancing, I'm sure.
Yeah.
How are we going to enforce that in the club? And if they don't do that, what are we gonna? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, so for the competitive, I mean, Michael couldn't answer this, but they're going to start back a little bit earlier online.
Yes. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, so they're going to be coming in for a soft opening before everyone else. We believe Chessington is going to open on the 17th. So maybe on the Friday and the Saturday, we're going to be testing with our computers there, and they'll be coming in. Obviously, because the groups are so small, a maximum of 15 people, that's potentially 3 people to a trampoline. So it's going to be very easy to socially distance them because you can have one on the trampoline, 2 spotting in the corners. So it's going to be easier to separate them around. And we are sending out a questionnaire this evening just to gauge feelings from the athletes and like their preferred coaching methods. Like, do they like to be caught? Do they want to use the rig? Are they just using their confidence and spatial awareness to learn those skills? Just to kind of gauge what they want, if we're buying extra equipment, do we need to put on more rig sessions? And then in there's a question about the Train Heroic app. Would they prefer to do all their conditioning at home using the app, now being able to monitor them more because we're going to be off furlough, and then just trampoline in class? I'm guessing they're going to do just trampoline in class, so then that way they really will not move off their spots. Obviously, you know, if they do move off those spots, there will be repercussions, but I think with that whole time off, they're going to want to be back at training. They're going to do what they want. They're going to behave, hopefully, and then they can do whatever they want when they leave that door. But while they're in there, we just have to keep them separate and follow those procedures. I'm sure a lot of them have already done it at school, so or they're going to be expecting it. So I don't think they're going to be too difficult to control.
Yeah, I think it'll be a bit easier. We'll be able to see them the whole time. As Michael said, we are probably not going to be running any flexibility or conditioning elements within the classes. It will just be trampoline, so they will be spotting strategically around the side. So you will have eyes on them the whole time, and they can't be hidden from view, you know, because the trampoline's obscuring them in some way. But you know, if they can't keep socially distancing, maybe the competitive ones that are more friendly, then they'll be told not to come in. I mean, I hope with adaptations they've experienced at school, when they go shopping, etc., that they'll abide by it. But if there is anything, we'll just pass that on to the parents, and then if we need to bring a special COVID behaviour report in, then we will. They'll obviously definitely won't be allowed to go to the toilets together, because you can only fit sometimes 1 or 2 people in there. So if anybody does need to go to the toilet, it will be one only. You know, that would definitely be the rule, because we know at that point we won't be able to see them. If they're obviously younger and they need assistance, then an adult's going to be obviously queuing them up and everything. But that will hopefully be done at the beginning and end of the classes, when the coach is, you know, taking them around the building to get to the exit.
And before they come, they will have a video or they'll be doing a presentation like this, explaining the new visual distancing measures, how the classes are going to run. They're going to be prepared before they come to expect, you know, a change and the expectation and behaviour that we expect from them.
Does that help you out?
Oh. Yeah, that's good. Cool, thanks.
We don't have to ask the parents if their child's had any COVID symptoms, do we? I mean, as a leisure facility, we would be hoping they would send them if they had a temperature.
Correct. I mean, we'll send them out. We won't get them to fill in a confirmation statement, because they'll be doing that every single week. But it would, as for the leisure centres and any shops you might go to, or the dentist I went to, it says do not enter this building if you are showing any symptoms. So British Gymnastics have given us a marketing pack that's, I believe, is on its way to us in the post. We've got one per site, and it has Foamex, Corex boards that we're going to be putting up at the entrances, exits around the buildings. And that will, I think one of them does say, don't enter if you have any symptoms. But if not, Peninsula have got loads of posters with their health and safety guidance, and we can print one out and that has do not enter if you've got symptoms.
Cool.
But I would hope if a child has got symptoms, they're not going to send them. I mean, let's have common sense. I mean, we'll only get into difficulties come the winter months, when they might just have a common cold versus an illness, but we hopefully think that they still wouldn't send them in that case anyway, or they get tested by then. It might be more accessible.
Yeah.
They're only going to be with us for an hour, maybe 2 hours. So the time, that's not enough time for them to really develop those symptoms or please show them. So we'll probably be absolutely fine in those circumstances.
And in terms of any interactions the children might have with one another outside of our environment, we obviously can't control those. Hopefully, if they are young enough, they will be supervised by adults or parents, or they'll use common sense. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens there. I mean, and generally for everybody, you know, now, I mean, most people can walk or drive, but if you are using or cycle, but if you're obviously using public transport, then you'll need to wear a mask as per the guidelines to protect yourself, because that would probably be riskier than actually coming to the classes with us in terms of getting to us. are there any further questions? We're coming to the end of the presentation now. I mean, if you've got any questions after this at Rise, you can just send an email to me, and then that will sort of solve your answers, and I can answer that. I mean, and also, as in that questionnaire, we'll obviously ask about your household, and if anybody is shielding, or if anybody is shielding in your household, then you need to let us know, because that obviously might determine when you come back. And if you haven't finished or completed the availability Google form that was sent out, and please do that, because we're going to start looking at the timetable from next week, now that we know when we can go back, so we can start to think, right, who can work A and B. There's the movability clause within the contracts, because we're a multi-site place, so I'll try and keep everybody, you know, at their general locations, but obviously Chessington's brand new, so people will be asked to go over there, and it's right by the train station and the bus stop. So when we get to that point, I'll let you all know. But yeah, I think that's the end. We've been an hour, it's coming up to 7 o'clock. Some of you aren't allowed to be on here after 7 with your ages on the work, you know, the time requirements. So I'm going to say goodbye. So bye-bye, everyone. You can wave if you've got your camera.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. See you all soon.
Bye. On my birthday. Because not look.